My daughter handed me papers and said, "Mom, just sign here, it's nothing important." But I sat down and read every word. My face went cold. She was transferring my house to her name. I signed it, but the next morning she screamed when the police knocked on her door. "Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable and relax, let's begin." The paper trembled in my hands, but not from weakness. The tremor was the vibration of my entire world shifting on its axis, a silent seismic event contained within the borders of a single, crisp legal form. The smell of our morning coffee, usually a comfort, turned acidic in my throat. Sunlight streamed across my kitchen table, illuminating the document like a spotlight on a crime scene. Across from me, my daughter Chloe smiled, a practiced, eager curve of her lips. "It's just a formality, Mom," she said again, her voice a gentle pressure. "The bank needs it for my file, for the loan." I had already read the words "quitclaim deed" at the top. My eyes, trained by decades as a library archivist to notice detail, skipped past the legalese to the heart of it. Grantor, Eleanor Washington. Grantee, Chloe Washington. The description of the property was my address, my house. "A formality," I repeated, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I kept reading. The language was clear. By signing, I would be granting, remising, releasing, and forever quitclaiming all my right, title, and interest in the property known as 2147 Magnolia Lane to the said Chloe Washington. It was not a document for a loan. It was a document for a transfer, an outright gift. Chloe shifted in her chair. "Derek says it's standard. It just shows the asset is in the family. It makes the application stronger." Derek, her boyfriend of 8 months, a man with shiny shoes and cloudier intentions. I looked up from the paper and met my daughter's eyes. I saw the impatience she was trying to mask, the slight tension in her jaw. I saw the ghost of the little girl who used to climb into my lap in this very kitchen, but she was overshadowed by the woman she was now, driven, slightly desperate, listening to a man who whispered of quick gains. "You need my house as collateral for a loan?" I asked, keeping my tone level almost conversational. "Not need asterisk, Mom. It's to leverage, to build. Derek has this incredible opportunity, a franchise thing, but we need to show strong backing. This just sits on your name doing nothing. We can make it work for us, for the family." It just sits on your name. The words were a small, sharp knife. This house was not an idle asset. It was every overtime shift I'd worked after Robert died. It was the floor Chloe learned to walk on. It was the walls that held our laughter and our tears. It was my anchor, my sanctuary, my single greatest testament to a life of careful, deliberate work. A cold clarity began to settle over me, hardening the initial shock. This was not a misunderstanding. Chloe knew what this paper was. The way her eyes avoided mine now, the way her fingers tapped the table, these were not the signs of someone facilitating a minor bank request. They were the signs of a person executing a plan. I thought of the last few months. Chloe's increased visits, her questions about property taxes, about my will, always couched in casual concern. "You should really have a living trust, Mom. Simplify things." Derek's appearances, his compliments about the neighborhood's rising values. The pieces, which I had viewed as isolated annoyances, clicked together into a single, ugly picture. They thought I was a quiet, aging woman, a librarian who loved her routines and her garden. They thought my careful nature was simplicity. They mistook patience for passivity. The betrayal was a physical coldness in my chest, but beneath it, something else stirred. A fierce, focused calm. I had spent a lifetime preserving things, documents, records, histories. I understood the power of paper. And I understood that sometimes, to preserve what is precious, you must first let the threat believe it has won. "Do you have a pen?" I asked. Chloe's entire body relaxed. The smile became genuine, relieved. "Of course, right here." She slid a sleek black pen across the table. I took it. The weight of it was insignificant. I looked at the signature line next to my printed name. I thought of all the signatures I had made in my life. Mortgage documents, Chloe's permission slips, birthday cards. This one would be different. "You're sure this is what you need?" I asked one final time, not for my clarity, but for hers. for the record that was now being etched in my memory. Absolutely, Mom. It's just a step. Everything stays the same. You won't even notice a thing. I nodded slowly. That much was true. I would not notice a thing. I would be too busy. I placed the tip of the pen on the paper. My hand, which I expected to shake, was perfectly steady. The line I drew for the E in Aliner was firm and clean. I signed my name, the full Aliner Washington, with the same practiced flourish I had used for 30 years. I handed the paper back to her. There, all done. Chloe beamed, grabbing the document and barely glancing at the signature before sliding it into a fancy leather portfolio. She leaned over and kissed my cheek. Thank you, Mom. You're the best. You'll see, this is going to be great for everyone. She stood, buzzing with victorious energy. I gotta run this to Derek. He's waiting. Love you. And she was gone, the back door closing with a soft click, leaving me alone in the sunny kitchen. The coffee was cold. The room was silent. I looked at the empty chair where she had sat. The space still seemed to hold the shape of her deception. I looked at my hands, the hands that had just signed away my home. They lay still on the wooden table. I did not cry. I did not rage. The time for those reactions had passed in the 30 seconds it took me to read the deed. Now, there was only the next step. I stood, walked to the sink, and poured the cold coffee down the drain. I rinsed the cup and placed it in the dishwasher. I wiped the already clean table. These small, orderly actions grounded me. When the kitchen was restored to its perfect state, I walked to the living room, to the old rotary dial phone I kept on the side table. I did not need to look up the number. I dialed. It rang twice. Marcus Johnson's office. Marcus, it's Ellie. My voice was calm, even. I need to see you. Today, I have just signed a quitclaim deed under fraudulent inducement. Yes, I understand what that means. I need to know what to do next. I listened to his shocked sputter on the other end. I looked out the window at my front garden, at the azaleas I had planted with Chloe when she was 10. They were blooming, a brilliant, defiant pink. No, Marcus, I said, cutting him off. I am not upset. I am prepared. Please tell me when I can come in. I hung up the phone. The deed was done. Theirs and now quietly mine. The game had begun, and they did not yet know they were playing. The phone call with Marcus lasted less than 3 minutes. He told me to meet him at the daily grind in 1 hour. He said not to bring the copy of the deed, as I didn't have one, but to bring myself and the facts in order. I hung up and looked at the clock. I had 57 minutes. I did not spend them packing or weeping. I spent them preparing. I changed from my home clothes into a simple linen pantsuit, taupe in color. I coiled my braids into a neat twist at the nape of my neck. I applied a minimal amount of lipstick. The woman in the mirror looked composed, intelligent, and older than I felt. That was acceptable. Age, in this instance, was an asset. I collected my handbag, my keys, and a small notebook where I had, over the years, jotted down dates and figures related to the house. Then I left, locking my front door with a distinct, solid click. The daily grind was the same as it had been for 15 years. Faded rug, mismatched armchairs, the constant hiss of the espresso machine. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon was a familiar blanket. I saw Marcus immediately, seated at a small round table in the back corner, away from the window. He stood as I approached. His face, usually marked by a kind weariness, was set in hard lines. Ellie, he said, pulling out my chair. His voice was low. Tell me everything from the beginning. I sat. I placed my bag on the floor, my notebook on the table. I did not order a drink. I needed my mind clear. I recounted the morning's events without embellishment. Chloe's arrival, her explanation of a formality for a loan, the presentation of the quitclaim deed, my reading of it, her continued insistence, my signature. I relayed the dialogue as precisely as I could remember it. I mentioned Derek's name and his alleged franchise opportunity. My voice was a steady, low monotone. I might have been describing the plot of a book I had read. When I finished, Marcus leaned back, running a hand over his close-cropped gray hair. He let out a long, slow breath. Good Lord, Ellie, I am so sorry. Thank you, I said, but sympathy is not the current requirement. Strategy is. You said on the phone you understood what fraudulent inducement meant. Explain it to me now as my lawyer." He nodded, the professional in him overtaking the friend. He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "A quitclaim deed is a valid instrument. It transfers whatever interest you have in a property. But its validity is based on a knowing, willing transfer. If you were deceived about the nature of the document, if you were told it was for a loan application when it was actually for an outright transfer, that is fraudulent inducement. It voids the transaction. It makes the deed voidable." "Voidable," I repeated, "meaning a judge can cancel it." "Yes, but that requires a lawsuit. It takes time. And during that time, Chloe, now the legal owner on paper, could sell the property to a third party or take out a loan against it. A messier situation. How do we stop that?" "Two things. Immediately. First, we file a report with the Adult Protective Services Unit and the police. A report of suspected financial exploitation of an elder. That creates a formal record. It signals criminal intent. It will frighten them. And the second, we place a lees pendens on the property title. It's Latin for pending lawsuit. It's a public notice, filed with the county recorder, that alerts anyone checking the title that there's a legal dispute over the ownership. No bank will lend against it. No title company will insure a sale. It freezes the asset. I considered this. The mechanics were clean, logical. How quickly can this be done? "The lees pendens I can draft and file this afternoon. The police report. We should go together. Today, your calm demeanor will be persuasive." He studied me. "You are remarkably calm, Ellie." "The time for panic was before the signature. I chose not to panic then. I will not choose it now." I opened my notebook. "What do you need from me for the lees pendens?" He listed the information. The full legal description of the property from my original deed, the parcel number, the date of the fraudulent transfer, the names of the parties. I read the details from my notes. His eyes widened slightly as I provided them without hesitation. "You were prepared," he stated. "I am a librarian, Marcus. Information is my vocation. I preserve it. This," I said, tapping my notebook, "is the history of my home. I know its provenance." He allowed himself a small, grim smile. "They have no idea who they're dealing with, do they? They think they are dealing with a mother, a soft target. They are not incorrect about the mother part." I closed the notebook. "There is another consideration." "What is it?" "Chloe is my daughter. The end goal is not to see her in prison. The end goal is to reclaim what is mine and to make the lesson so severe she never considers such a thing again. The legal actions are the pressure. What is the mechanism for her to surrender the deed willingly?" Marcus thought for a moment. "The threat of the lawsuit combined with the criminal investigation. We use the pressure to force a reconveyance. She signs a new deed giving the property back to you. We agree to drop the civil suit. The criminal report that's trickier. Once the state picks it up, it's not entirely ours to control. But her cooperation, a swift return of the property, her lack of prior record, these would be factors, especially if we can demonstrate the boyfriend was the prime instigator." "Derek," I said the name flat. "Yes, we focus the pressure on him as the outsider, the influencer. That may give Chloe a path to capitulation that saves some face. A mother's mercy, however conditional." I absorbed this. It was a chess game, several moves ahead. "I want the lees pendens filed today. Then we go to the police. Then once the report number is issued, I want you to send a formal letter to Chloe. At her apartment. Delivered by certified mail. The letter should state that I, through my attorney, am alleging the deed was obtained by fraud and undue influence. It should state that a lees pendens has been filed and a criminal report made. It should demand the immediate execution and return of a quitclaim deed from her back to me. Give a deadline, 72 hours. Marcus was writing on a napkin. That is aggressive. It will terrify her. Good, I said. The word came out quietly but with finality. Terror is a potent teacher. She is 32. She chose this path. Now she gets to walk it and see where it leads. I finally signaled the waitress and ordered a glass of water. I drank it slowly, feeling the cool liquid trace a path down my throat, calming the last of the internal heat. The plan was no longer a vague resolve in my kitchen. It was a list of actions on a paper napkin. It had steps and timelines. Marcus watched me. You signed that deed knowing you would do this, didn't you? You never intended to just give her the house. I met his gaze. I signed that deed to prove her intent. My signature is the evidence. Had I refused, it would have been a family argument, a disappointment. Now it is a legal matter. She made it so. I am simply following her lead. He shook his head, not in disapproval, but in awe. Remind me never to get on your bad side. You are on my good side, Marcus. That is why you are here. I finished my water and placed the glass neatly on the coaster. Shall we go to the police station now? I would like to complete step 1. The police station was a blur of fluorescent lights and muted conversations. I sat in a small, beige interview room with Marcus. A detective named Alvarez listened, her expression neutral, as I recounted the events again. I used the same precise language. I presented the facts as I had to Marcus. I showed her the notebook with the property details. I stated my belief that my daughter and her boyfriend had conspired to deprive me of my home through deception. Detective Alvarez took notes. She asked clarifying questions. Was I of sound mind? Did I understand the document when I signed it? I answered yes to the first and no to the second, explaining the fraudulent inducement. Marcus interjected with legal terms when necessary. After 45 minutes, she had a preliminary report. She gave me a case number on a small slip of paper. She said the Financial Crimes Unit would review it. She advised that I might be contacted again. I thanked her, my manner polite and composed. Marcus and I left without speaking until we were in the parking lot. It started, he said, opening my car door for me. The lease pendens is filed. The report is logged. I'll have the demand letter to Chloe by tomorrow. I nodded. Thank you, Marcus. I will be home if you need me. I drove back to my house. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of my neighborhood. I parked in my driveway and sat for a moment looking at the structure. The white clapboard siding, the dark green shutters I had painted myself, the porch swing Robert had installed. It was just a house, and it was everything. Inside, the silence was different. It was no longer the quiet of solitude I was accustomed to, but the quiet of a crime scene, awaiting investigation. I removed my coat and hung it in the closet. I placed my handbag on the hall table. I made a cup of tea, not because I wanted it, but because the ritual of boiling water, steeping the leaves, waiting for it to cool, provided a scaffold for my thoughts. With the tea in hand, I began to walk. I did not have a destination. My feet carried me on a slow patrol of my own history. I stopped in the living room by the worn burgundy armchair, Robert's chair. He had died of a sudden aneurysm when Chloe was 7. The chair had not been moved in 25 years. The indent in the cushion was permanent. I did not sit in it, but I placed my hand on the back of it, feeling the nubby fabric. The memory was not of his death, but of a mundane evening. Him reading the newspaper, me grading papers from a night class I was taking, Chloe playing with blocks on the floor. The quiet hum of a family. That life, that safety, had ended. I had rebuilt from nothing, and this house had been the foundation. I moved to the doorway between the kitchen and the hall. On the frame, faint but still visible, were a series of pencil marks and dates. Chloe's heights from age 3 to age 16. I ran my finger over the highest mark. She had been so eager to grow up, to leave. I had been so proud of each inch. The betrayal felt, for a moment, like a physical reversal of that growth, a shrinking of the person I thought I knew. In the hallway, I looked at the gallery of photographs. Chloe's school pictures, gap-toothed and grinning. Our vacation to the Grand Canyon. My graduation with my master's degree in library science. A formal portrait of Robert and me on our wedding day, young and impossibly hopeful. Each frame was a brick in the wall of my life. She had not just tried to take a house. She had tried to dismantle this wall, brick by brick. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. In the back of my closet on the top shelf was a small fireproof safe. I knew the combination by heart. I opened it. Inside were important papers. My birth certificate, Robert's death certificate, my marriage license, my will. And at the bottom, in a faded manila envelope, the original paperwork for the house. I took the envelope to my bed and sat down. I spilled the contents onto the quilt. The original sales contract from 1989. The loan documents from the bank, the deed of trust, the closing statement. I spread them out. The numbers were staggering to my younger self. The monthly payment had been a terrifying sum on my clerical salary. I remembered the sleepless nights, the meticulous budgeting, the foregoing of dinners out, new clothes, anything frivolous. Every payment had been a battle fought and won. This stack of paper was the archive of that war. Beneath the financial documents was a single photograph, black and white, of the house the day we bought it. It looked bare, a little tired. The lawn was patchy. The porch lacked a swing. I looked at the young woman in the picture, standing next to a young Robert, their hands clasped. That woman had believed in a future built on effort and integrity. I gathered all the papers, including the photograph, and placed them in a neat stack. I returned the empty safe to the closet. I carried the documents downstairs to the dining room table. I sat there for a long time, my hands resting on the pile. The tea grew cold. The room darkened. I did not turn on a light. The physical evidence of my struggle, of my triumph, was under my palms. The fraudulent quitclaim deed Chloe now possessed was a ghost next to this substantial history. The cold, strategic focus I had felt in the cafe and the police station now fused with something deeper, hotter, and more durable. This was not just about outsmarting her. This was about defending the literal proof of my life's work. The love I had for my daughter was a complicated, wounded thing, still present but now locked away in a separate compartment. The resolve that filled the available space was absolute. It was mineral. It was the bedrock the house stood on. They had thought they were taking an asset from a gentle woman. They were wrong. They were declaring war on an archivist. And an archivist knows that to win, you must have the better records. I had mine. I knew every line, every date, every sacrifice they represented. I finally stood, my joints stiff. I placed the documents into a new, sturdy accordion folder. I labeled it in clear block letters, 2147 Magnolia Lane, Originals. I would give copies to Marcus tomorrow. The originals would not leave my sight again. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt like a crime scene. It felt like a fortress, and I was its sole, determined custodian. The accordion folder felt substantial in my hands, a physical counterweight to the single fraudulent sheet Chloe now possessed. The next morning, I drove to Marcus's office in a modest brick building downtown. His space was on the second floor. The waiting area was quiet, with leather chairs and framed diplomas on the wall. His secretary, a woman my age named Gloria, nodded to me with a knowing sympathy. Word, it seemed, traveled on a quiet current. "He's expecting you, Ellie. Go right in." Marcus's office was a testament to his career. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves laden with thick volumes, a large oak desk piled with neat stacks of paper, and a sitting area with 2 client chairs. The air smelled of old paper and lemon wood polish. He stood as I entered, gesturing to a chair. "You brought the history," he said, nodding the folder. "I brought the foundation," I corrected, placing it on his desk. I sat, my posture straight. "The originals are in here. I made copies for you." I withdrew a second, thinner folder from my bag and handed it to him. He opened it, scanning the documents with a practiced eye. "Excellent. This is perfect. The chain of title is clean. Your ownership is incontestable, aside from the new quitclaim." He set the copies aside. "Now we build the case to void that. Let me explain the architecture." He picked up a legal pad and began to draw a simple diagram. "Think of your property title as a clean sheet of paper. Your original deed is the first and only valid writing on it." He drew a square at the top of the page. "The fraudulent quitclaim deed is like someone slapping a transparent sheet over it, with new writing that claims to change the name." He placed an imaginary layer over the pad. "Our job is to peel that transparent sheet off and discard it." And the tools. The police report is one tool. It suggests criminal activity, which makes the courts look unfavorably on the transaction. The lees pendens is another. It's a flag on the title itself, warning everyone to stop. But the main event is a civil lawsuit for quiet title and cancellation of instrument. We sue Chloe to have a judge declare the deed void due to fraud. I process this, a lawsuit against my own daughter. It's the necessary mechanism. The threat of it, combined with the criminal exposure, is what will likely force a settlement, the reconveyance I mentioned. But we must be prepared to follow through. "I am prepared," I stated. What is the timeline? If we file suit, it could be months before a court date. The demand letter is our first, fastest shot across the bow. I finalized it this morning. He slid a piece of paper across the desk to me. The letter was on his firm's letterhead. It was addressed to Chloe Washington at her apartment. My eyes scanned the text. It was a masterclass in cold, professional menace. It referenced the quitclaim deed of date, alleged it was procured by fraudulent misrepresentation and undue influence, noted the filing of a lease pendens with the county recorder, and formally demanded the execution and return of a new quitclaim deed from her to me within 72 hours. It further stated that failure to comply would result in the immediate filing of a civil lawsuit seeking full damages, and that a copy of the letter had been provided to the Financial Crimes Unit investigating the matter. It was signed by Marcus T. Johnson, Esq. It is very clear, I said. It is designed to induce panic, which brings us to strategy. Marcus leaned back, steepling his fingers. We have two targets, Chloe and Derek. The letter goes to Chloe. The pressure, however, should be applied to Derek. He is the instigator, and he is also the weaker link. Why weaker? He has no emotional tie to you. He sees this as a transaction that has gone wrong. He is motivated by greed and self-preservation. When the legal consequences become real, his instinct will be to cut his losses. He may try to blame Chloe to save himself. That fracture is useful to us. I saw the logic, divide and conquer. It was a ruthless calculus applied to the people my daughter loved. How do we apply pressure to him specifically? The police, Marcus said simply. When Detective Alvarez or her colleagues follow up, they will want to interview both parties. We cannot control that, but we can suggest the sequence. I will inform the detective that our information suggests Mr. Derek was the architect of the scheme, leveraging his relationship with Ms. Washington to access the victim. They will likely speak to him first. A police interview has a way of focusing the mind. I looked out the window at the city street below. People walked with purpose, unaware of the quiet war being plotted in this room. So the steps are, the letter arrives, causing panic. The police contact Derek, increasing the panic. They turn on each other. And amidst that chaos, Chloe sees the path of least resistance is to give back what she took. That is the optimal scenario, Marcus agreed. It avoids a protracted public court battle. It returns your property quickly. It leaves them with a profound lesson and legal scars, but not necessarily prison time, if they are smart and act quickly. I turn my gaze back to him. And if they are not smart, if they fight? Then we fight. His expression was solemn. We have the evidence, Ellie. You are a credible, composed victim. The fraudulent inducement is clear. A judge will see it. It will just take longer and be more expensive for them in the end. The lawsuit would also name Derek as a co-defendant for conspiracy. His assets, such as they are, would be at risk. I nodded slowly. The plan was comprehensive. It was also cruel in its precision. I felt a pang, not for Derek, but for the daughter who had placed herself in this machine. I had built the machine. I had chosen to turn it on. Send the letter, I said, my voice leaving no room for hesitation. Certified mail, return receipt requested. She will have to sign for it. I'll send it today. She should receive it tomorrow. Good. I stood up, collecting my original folder. Keep me informed of any response. I will be at home. Ellie, Marcus said as I reached the door. I turned. Are you all right? It was the friend asking, not the lawyer. I considered the question. I was not all right. A part of me was shattered, but that part was not in charge. The part that was in charge was focused, clear, and operational. That part was, for the moment, enough. I am functional, Marcus. That is what is required. I left his office, the folder held tightly against my chest. The legal web was spun. The paper walls, as he called them, were under construction. Now we waited for the flies to hit the strands. The certified letter would have been delivered to Chloe's apartment at approximately 11:27 a.m. the next day. I know this because Marcus received the electronic return receipt. I was in my garden, weeding the flower beds, when my phone buzzed with his text. Letter delivered. Signed for by C. Washington. The clock starts now. I placed the phone face down on the grass beside me and continued my work. The soil was cool and damp. I pulled the weeds with a firm, steady pressure, ensuring I removed the roots. I did not wonder what Chloe was doing at that moment. I knew. The calculation was simple. She would have opened the stiff envelope, seen the law firm's letterhead, and read the words. The panic would be immediate, a chemical flood. She would call Derek. The argument would start soon after. I was correct. I learned the specifics later from multiple sources, but the broad strokes were inevitable. Chloe was in her apartment, a sleek, modern box in a complex north of the city. The space was decorated in shades of gray, with expensive, uncomfortable-looking furniture. She had signed for the letter without much thought. When she saw Marcus Johnson's name, her heart, as she would later admit to a friend who eventually told me, dropped into her stomach. She read it standing in her kitchen under the cold light of the LED fixtures. Each sentence was a hammer blow: fraudulent misrepresentation, undue influence, Lee's pendants filed, criminal investigation, the demand for a reconveyance within 72 hours, the threat of a lawsuit. It was legal language, but its meaning was clear. She was caught. Her first call was to Derek. He was at work, or so he claimed. "What did you do?" were his first words to her, after she read the letter aloud, her voice trembling. "What did I do? This is your plan. You said it was just a formality for the loan. You never said it was giving her the house outright." "It was for the loan," Derek snapped, his voice low. I can imagine the scene, him in some glass-walled office or his car, looking around to ensure he wasn't overheard. "The bank needs to see the asset free and clear to leverage it. You were supposed to get the loan and then put her back on the title later. It's a standard refinance maneuver." "That is not what this letter says. It says fraud, Derek. It says the police are involved. There's something called a Lee's pendants on the house now. We can't sell it. We can't do anything." "Your mother," he said, the words sharp. "She went to a lawyer. She's making a big deal out of nothing. She's emotional." "My mother is not emotional. She's the least emotional person I know. She's procedural. This letter is a procedure, and it says we have 3 days to give it back or she'll sue me. So call her, smooth it over, be her daughter, make her drop it." "You don't understand. If she's gone this far, she won't drop it." Chloe's voice was rising toward hysteria. "And the police, Derek, it says they're investigating." "They're bluffing. It's a scare tactic from the lawyer. They have to prove we lied to her. It's her word against yours." "She has the signed paper. I handed it to you. Where is it?" There was a pause. "It's safe, but if she's playing hardball, maybe we need to talk to someone, a different lawyer." "I can't afford a lawyer." "Then you shouldn't have gotten us into this mess." The line went dead. He had hung up on her. The rest of that day and evening was, I deduced, a cycle of frantic phone calls, tears, and terrified inaction. Chloe did not call me. That was her first strategic error. Derek, I would learn, made calls of his own to a cousin who knew a guy in real estate law, who told him a Lee's pendants was serious business and that fraud allegations were not to be ignored. The next morning, at 8:15 a.m., the consequence arrived in a form neither of them had truly believed would come. There was a firm, authoritative knock on the door of Chloe's apartment, not the tentative tap of a neighbor or a delivery person. A solid, official knock. Chloe, who had slept little, opened the door. 2 people stood there, a man and a woman in plain clothes, but with the bearing of authority. The woman held up a badge. "Chloe Washington, I'm Detective Alvarez, Financial Crimes. This is my partner, Detective Ruiz. We'd like to ask you a few questions about a report we've received. May we come in?" Chloe told me later, during a more subdued conversation, that she made a sound, a sharp intake of breath that was almost a scream, but stifled. Her vision swam. The words financial crimes made the letter real in a way paper could not. A report, she managed. "Regarding the transfer of property at 2147 Magnolia Lane from your mother, Eleanor Washington, to yourself. We're speaking to all parties involved. It's a preliminary inquiry." They did not wait for a fuller invitation. They stepped inside, their eyes taking in the apartment. Chloe stood frozen in her sweats, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. I need to call I don't have a lawyer. You're not under arrest, Ms. Washington, Detective Alvarez said, her tone neutral but firm. We're just gathering information, but you are free to have an attorney present if you wish. Do you wish to answer some questions now? Chloe, terrified and alone, shook her head. No, I want a lawyer. That is your right, Ruiz said. He handed her a business card. When you retain counsel, have them contact us. We will also need to speak with a Derek Simmons. Is he available? I don't know, Chloe whispered. We'll find him. Thank you for your time. They left as calmly as they had arrived. Chloe closed the door, slid down its length to the floor, and wrapped her arms around her knees. The police had not yelled. They had not handcuffed her. They had been professionally courteous. That was what made it so profoundly terrifying. It was not a scene from television. It was a quiet, real, and irrevocable step into a system she could not control. In my garden at that same hour, I was planting new marigolds. I felt no surge of victory. I felt the grim satisfaction of a prediction confirmed. The plan was progressing. The pressure was applied. The first domino had fallen. I pressed the soil around the bright yellow blooms, firming it with my palms. The next move was theirs. The marigolds were in, a line of defiant orange against the dark soil. I was on my knees, patting the last one into place, when I heard a car door slam with unnecessary force. The sound was sharp in the quiet afternoon. I did not look up. I recognized the rhythm of the steps coming up my driveway, hurried, unbalanced. Chloe. I continued to tidy my gardening tray, placing the trowel and hand rake back in their designated spots. I heard her breath before I saw her, ragged and shallow. Mom. I looked up then. She stood at the edge of the garden bed, still in the sweats she'd worn when the detectives came. Her hair was unbrushed. Her eyes were wide, red-rimmed. She looked like a cornered animal. Chloe, you should have called before coming over. My voice was calm. I brushed the soil from my gloves. Called, you want me to call asterisk? Her voice cracked. The police came to my apartment, Mom, this morning. They had badges. They said they were investigating asterisk fraud. I peeled off my gardening gloves, one finger at a time. I am aware of the investigation. You asterisk are. Did you send them? The question was a mixture of accusation and disbelief. I filed a report, yes, after I consulted with Marcus Johnson. It seemed the appropriate course of action, given the circumstances. I stood up, my knees protesting slightly. I walked to the outdoor faucet to wash my hands. She followed me, her words tumbling out. You have to stop it. You have to call them and tell them it was a misunderstanding, a family thing. Tell them you changed your mind. I turned off the water and dried my hands on the towel hanging from a hook. I faced her. It was not a misunderstanding, Chloe. You presented me with a quitclaim deed. You told me it was a formality for a loan. That was a lie. The document was for an outright transfer of my home to you. That is fraud. It wasn't like that, Derek said. I am not interested in what Derek said, I interrupted, my tone even but final. I am interested in what you did. You looked me in the eye in my own kitchen and you lied to me. You pressured me. You betrayed my trust in a fundamental way. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was going to fix it. It was just a step to get the financing for Derek's business. We were going to put you back on the title later. We were going to make money for all of us. I studied her. The desperation was real, but the explanation was a child's fantasy, rehearsed and hollow. No, you were not. Once the deed was signed and recorded, you had what you wanted. There would have been no later. There would have been excuses, market conditions, loan complications, and I would have been a tenant in my own home, dependent on your goodwill, which you have just demonstrated is a scarce commodity. She shook her head, backing up a step as if physically struck. You don't know that. You're assuming the worst of me. I am observing your actions, and my observation led me to a conclusion. I signed that paper knowing exactly what it was. The words hung in the air between us. Her tears stopped abruptly, replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. What? I read it. I understood it was a quitclaim deed. I knew you were lying about its purpose. I kept my gaze steady on hers. I signed it anyway. Her face went pale. Why? Why would you do that? Because a refusal would have only led to more pressure, more lies. It would have remained a family argument. By signing, I created evidence. Your fraudulent inducement became a fact, not a suspicion. My signature was the trap. You walked right into it. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. I saw the moment the full picture assembled in her mind. My calm demeanor that morning, the immediate call to Marcus, the swift legal countermeasures. It had not been a reaction. It had been a plan. You set me up. The whisper was full of a new kind of hurt. I defended myself, I corrected. You set the game in motion. I simply decided to play it to its logical conclusion. The Lee's pendants locks the title. The police investigation establishes criminal intent. The demand letter gives you a choice. You have, I glanced at my watch, approximately 48 hours to execute a new deed, returning the property to me. If you do not, Marcus will file the civil lawsuit. You will be named as a defendant. So will Derek. You'd sue me, your own daughter. You stole from me, Chloe. The relationship does not grant immunity. It makes the crime worse. I said it without heat, as a simple statement of fact. She sank onto the low brick wall bordering the garden. All the fight seemed to drain out of her. What do you want from me? I want my house back, free and clear. I want you to pay the legal fees I have incurred. And I want you to understand, in a way you will never forget, that what you did was not clever. It was a profound and stupid failure of character. And then what? She asked, her voice small. We just go back to normal. I looked at my house, then back at her. No, there is no back. The path that was here is broken. This house was always meant to be your inheritance. That was the plan. But inheritance implies a transition upon my death, not a theft during my life. That plan is now void. We will have to see what, if anything, can be built on the new ground. That will depend entirely on you and on a long, difficult process of proving you have learned this lesson. She began to cry again, this time silently, her shoulders shaking. It was not the performative hysteria of before. It was the sound of genuine shame and loss. I felt a heavy ache in my chest, but I did not move to comfort her. Comfort at this moment would dilute the lesson. Some pains must be fully felt to be remembered. I'm sorry, she whispered. I believe you are sorry you were caught. I believe you are sorry you are in pain. I hope, in time, you will be sorry for the pain you caused. That will be the beginning. I picked up my gardening tray. The clock is still ticking, Chloe. You should talk to Derek. You should both decide how you wish to proceed. My terms are not negotiable. I turned and walked toward the back door. I did not look back. I entered my kitchen, placed the tray in its spot, and stood at the sink, looking out at the garden. She remained on the wall for several more minutes, a small, defeated figure amid the blooming flowers. Then she stood, wiped her face with her sleeve, and walked slowly to her car. She did not look toward the house. I exhaled a breath I had not realized I was holding. The confrontation was over. The truth had been weaponized. It had been as brutal as I intended. I felt no triumph, only a weary certainty. The next move was still hers, but now she knew the board, the rules, and the caliber of the player she had challenged. The silence after Chloe drove away was deeper than the ordinary quiet of my house. It was the quiet of a field after a battle, where the air still hums with spent energy. I remained at the sink, watching the empty space where her car had been. The confrontation had unfolded precisely as I had envisioned it during my long nights of planning. Her shock, her desperation, her dawning comprehension, all were expected. Yet witnessing them in the flesh left a hollow, metallic taste in my mouth. I had just surgically dismantled my daughter's reality. There was no pleasure in it, only a grim necessity. I spent the remainder of that day in routine tasks. I organized a closet. I balanced my checkbook. I read a historical biography but retained none of it. My mind was a waiting room. Marcus had said the pressure would force a fracture between Chloe and Derek. I was waiting for the crack. It came the next morning. Marcus called just after 9. Ellie, there's movement. Detective Alvarez just called me as a courtesy. Derek Simmons came into the station voluntarily last night with a retained attorney. I sat down at the kitchen table. Voluntarily. A preemptive move. He gave a statement. The gist of it is that he admits to advising Chloe on the quitclaim deed as a financial strategy, but claims he was under the impression Chloe had her mother's full understanding and consent. He says the miscommunication about the loan's purpose was a tragic misunderstanding between mother and daughter, and that he was merely a consultant. He is portraying Chloe as the driving force, the one who stood to gain the property, and who handled all direct communication with you. I absorbed this. It was the predictable, cowardly play, shifting all blame to her. Exactly. He's throwing her under the bus to save his own skin. His statement is carefully worded to distance himself from any intent to defraud. He's claiming he never spoke to you directly, which is true, and therefore couldn't have misled you. And the police believe him. They don't have to believe him entirely. The statement itself creates reasonable doubt about his criminal liability, but it also confirms the central fact. You were deceived about the document's purpose. It strengthens our civil case against both of them, but it potentially isolates Chloe for the criminal side. She is now the primary target of the fraud investigation. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. This was the desired outcome, the engineered collapse, yet hearing it actualized was sobering. Derek had proven himself exactly the man I suspected. Where is Chloe in all this? That's the next piece, Marcus said, his voice grim. I filed the civil lawsuit this morning, as we discussed we would if the deadline passed without action. The complaint names both Chloe Washington and Derek Simmons as defendants for conspiracy, fraudulent inducement, and elder financial abuse. It seeks cancellation of the deed, reconveyance, and damages for legal fees. A process server is on his way to Chloe's place of employment as we speak. Her job, I had not considered that specific detail. It's a common and effective method of service. It ensures receipt and maximizes the impact. She will be served today. I closed my eyes. The image was clear. My daughter, in her professional environment, being handed a sheaf of papers that accused her of stealing from her mother. The humiliation would be total. The lesson would be etched into her public identity as well as her private conscience. It was harsh. It was also the consequence she had set in motion. I understand, I said. The pressure is now at its maximum point, Ellie. Derek has abandoned her. She is facing a criminal probe and a civil suit. Her options have narrowed to one: surrender. I expect we will hear from her or a lawyer representing her by the end of the day. We ended the call. I sat for a long time at the table. The machinery of justice, once engaged, had its own relentless momentum. I had pulled the lever. Now I watched the gears turn. The process server found Chloe at her office at 11:17 a.m. She was in a sales meeting, or so I later learned from a gossipy former colleague of hers who knew my neighbor. A man approached the receptionist, asked for Chloe Washington, and when she came out, he said, "Chloe Washington, you've been served." He placed the thick legal packet into her hands. She took it, her face blank with confusion, then horror as she read the cover sheet. Washington v. Washington and Simmons, her name listed as a defendant. The words elder financial abuse in bold. Her colleagues watched. Someone asked if she was okay. She did not answer. She walked to her desk, gathered her purse and coat with trembling hands, and left the building without a word to her manager. She called Derek from her car. He did not answer. She called 3 more times. On the 4th attempt, he picked up. "They sued me," she said, her voice flat. "At my job, everyone saw." "I know," Derek said. There was no warmth in his tone. "My lawyer got a copy. Look, this is getting too hot. You need to handle this on your end. I've given my statement. I've got my own problems." "Your statement? What statement?" A pause. "I talked to the police with my lawyer. I clarified my role, which was advisory. This is between you and your mom, Chloe. You need to fix it." The line went dead. She told me later, in a broken whisper, that she sat in her parked car for an hour, staring at the lawsuit papers in the passenger seat, understanding finally and completely that she was alone. The boyfriend who had crafted the scheme had vanished from it, leaving her holding the toxic package. The mother she had betrayed had transformed into a formidable, untouchable adversary. She had no allies, no strategy, and no way out except through the terms I had dictated. In my quiet house, I felt the shift. The balance of power was now absolute. The unraveling was complete. The next communication would be a white flag. I prepared myself to receive it. I did not hear from Chloe that day or the next. The silence was its own form of communication. She was in shock, assessing the ruin. I knew she would need to find a lawyer, one she could barely afford, who would tell her the same thing Marcus had predicted. Her only viable option was to agree to my terms. The waiting was a deliberate part of the process. It allowed the reality of her situation to sink in, layer by layer. On the third day of that silence, I decided to leave the house. The walls, though once again my fortress, felt like they were pressing in. I needed the sound of other voices, the rhythm of ordinary life. I drove to the community senior center. The center was housed in a converted church, its walls painted a cheerful yellow. Inside, the air was warm and carried the competing scents of coffee, polish, and the day's lunch, smothered pork chops and collard greens. The large main room buzzed with activity. A dominoes game was in progress at one table, its slapping tiles punctuating the conversation. At another, women were playing bid whist, their laughter sharp and sudden. This was my community, my generation. We had raised children, buried parents, survived layoffs and recessions. We understood the value of what you managed to hold onto. I was spotted immediately by Bernadette, a retired school principal with a voice that still carried across a room. "Ellie Washington, get over here and tell me why you look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." I managed a small smile and made my way to their usual table, where Bernadette held court with Maureen and Lena. Maureen, a tiny woman with hands gnarled by arthritis, was a former seamstress. Lena had worked for the phone company for 40 years. They were my friends, my informal counsel. They were also, in the way of our community, impeccably informed. I pulled up a chair. "Just a lot on my mind," I said. Bernadette gave me a look that had silenced countless fifth graders. "Chili, please. We have ears. My niece works in the courthouse. She mentioned a certain lease pendants filed on a certain property on Magnolia Lane." There was no point in denial. The network was efficient and compassionate. I nodded slowly. "It's true." Maureen reached over and patted my hand. "That girl of yours let that man get into her head, didn't she?" "It appears so," I said. Lena shook her head, her gold hoop earrings catching the light. "Happens more than you think. My Cynthia's boy, remember, tried to get her to take a reverse mortgage to fund his recording studio. Almost got it, too, before her pastor sat her down with a financial advisor. These kids see our houses not as homes, but as ATMs. "It's the disrespect that cuts," Maureen said, her voice softer. "After all we did, all we went without, they think it was easy. They think it's just sitting there for the taking." Bernadette leaned in. "So what are you doing about it, Ellie? Because I know you. You're not just sitting in that house crying." I looked at their faces, lined with experience and fierce intelligence. They were not victims. They were survivors. I felt no need to dissemble. "I filed a police report for elder fraud. My lawyer filed a lease pendants to freeze the title. We've sued her and the boyfriend to reverse the deed. They have to give it back and pay the legal costs." A beat of silence followed. Then Bernadette let out a low, appreciative whistle. "You went nuclear." "I went logical," I corrected. "She created a legal problem. I am using legal solutions." Maureen's eyes gleamed with a hard approval. "Good. You have to hit them where they understand. Wounded feelings don't mean nothing to them. A lawsuit, that they understand." "Did you sign the paper?" Lena asked, point blank. I did, after I read it and knew what it was. This time, their silence was filled with a deeper respect. They exchanged glances. They understood the calculated nature of that act. It was not passive victimhood, it was tactical. Bernadette nodded slowly. "You gave her enough rope, and she used it. Now you're pulling it tight. That's a mother's lesson right there. Hard, but necessary." "It doesn't feel like a mother's act," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "It feels like warfare." "Sometimes it is," Lena said firmly. "You're not fighting your child. You're fighting the foolishness that's taken hold of her. You're fighting for what's yours. That's a righteous fight. This," she gestured around the vibrant, noisy room, "all of this, our peace, our security, it wasn't given. It was guarded. With every payment, every sacrifice. Guarding it isn't selfish. It's sacred. Her words landed in the center of my chest, solid and affirming. This was what I had come for, not for gossip or pity, but for this reinforcement of my own ethos. They were not sympathizing with a victim. They were aligning themselves with a general. "What happens now?" Maureen asked. "Now we wait for her surrender," I said. "The pressure is applied. The boyfriend has already abandoned her, blaming her to the police. She is alone with the consequences." Bernadette smiled, a thin, knowing curve of her lips. "Nothing like being alone to make a person get right with themselves. She'll come around. And when she does, you remember what Lena said. Guarding what's yours is sacred. Don't you back down an inch." We sat for a while longer, the conversation shifting to other things. Bernadette's troublesome garden hose, Maureen's great-grandbaby's christening, the city's plan to repave our streets. The normalcy was a balm. I was not an outlier here. I was among women who had fought their own battles, held their own lines. Their support was not emotional coddling. It was a collective nod of recognition. They saw my actions as correct, as just, as necessary. When I left the center an hour later, the weight in my shoulders had redistributed. It was no longer the crushing weight of betrayal, but the solid, manageable weight of responsibility. I was not just Ellie, wronged mother. I was Ellie, defender of her domain, a role understood and respected by the women who walked this path before me. The community had witnessed my stance and found it valid. That knowledge, as much as any legal document, fortified my resolve. The path ahead was still painful, but I no longer walked it alone in spirit. I walked with the quiet, steely approval of the aunties. The call came the next morning, as I was finishing my coffee. It was Marcus. "It's time," he said, no greeting necessary. "Chloe's attorney contacted me. They want to discuss a settlement. They've agreed to mediation today in my office at 2:00. Are you ready?" I looked at the clock. It was 10. "I am ready. Who will be there?" Chloe, her attorney, a young man named Peterson from a downtown firm, probably doing this pro bono to get experience. Myself. And you. Derek will not be present. His criminal case is separate now. This is just to resolve the civil matter between you and Chloe. Understood. I will be there. I spent the intervening hours with methodical preparation. I dressed in a navy blue suit, a single strand of pearls at my neck. I reviewed the folder of original documents one last time. I did not rehearse what I would say. I knew my position. The terms were non-negotiable. My role was to be present, to be a silent, immovable fact. Marcus's office conference room felt different from his private office. It was colder, more anonymous. A long, polished table, chairs with black leather seats, a water pitcher and glasses in the center. The air conditioning hummed at a low frequency. I arrived first with Marcus. He placed a legal pad and several files at the head of the table. At exactly 2:00, the door opened. Chloe entered, followed by a man in his late 20s wearing an ill-fitting suit. He carried a briefcase. Chloe looked diminished. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry. Her eyes were downcast, her shoulders slumped. She glanced at me once, a quick, skittish look, then focused on the empty chair opposite mine. She looked like someone awaiting a verdict, not negotiating a settlement. "Ms. Washington, Mr. Peterson," Marcus said, his voice professionally neutral. "Please have a seat." They sat. Peterson cleared his throat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice. My client is eager to resolve this matter." "As is mine," Marcus replied. "Shall we proceed to terms? To be clear, we are here because the lawsuit has been filed. The purpose is to see if we can agree on a stipulated judgment to avoid further litigation. My client's position is straightforward." He opened a file and slid a single sheet of paper across the table to Peterson. "These are the terms. 1. Immediate execution of a quitclaim deed from Chloe Washington to Alina Washington, reconveying the property at 2147 Magnolia Lane. 2. Payment of all legal fees and costs incurred by Alina Washington, totaling $8,427.50, payable within 30 days. 3. A formal written apology from Chloe Washington to Alina Washington, acknowledging the fraudulent nature of the initial transfer, to be notarized. Upon satisfactory completion of these 3 items, my client will dismiss the civil lawsuit with prejudice and will inform the district attorney's office of the settlement, which may be taken into consideration regarding the pending criminal investigation. Peterson scanned the paper. Chloe stared at her hands in her lap. The fees are substantial, Peterson said, his voice tight. They are the actual costs of rectifying the fraud your client committed, Marcus stated. They are not negotiable. Peterson leaned over and whispered to Chloe. She nodded without looking up. My client agrees to the reconveyance, Peterson said. She also agrees to the apology. The financial amount, she is currently unemployed. The service of the lawsuit occurred at her place of work. She was let go. I had not known this detail. The machinery had ground finer than I had specifically intended. I felt a flicker, not of pity, but of acknowledgement. The consequences were total. The payment can be structured, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was calm and filled the quiet room. A payment plan, but it must be completed within 1 year, with interest at the legal rate. Marcus glanced at me, a slight nod of approval. It was a concession that cost me nothing and allowed the terms to be accepted. Peterson whispered to Chloe again. She nodded, still not looking at me. That is acceptable, Peterson said. Then we have an agreement in principle, Marcus said. I will draft the settlement agreement and mutual release this afternoon. It will include the payment schedule. We will meet here tomorrow at 10 a.m. for signatures. At that time, Ms. Chloe Washington will also sign the reconveyance deed and the apology. We will file the deed with the county immediately after. Are we clear? Yes, Peterson said. Chloe, Marcus's tone was direct. She finally lifted her head. Her eyes were dry but hollow. Yes, I understand. Do you have anything you wish to say to your mother at this time? Marcus asked. It was not part of the script, but I understood he was doing it for the record and for me. Chloe's gaze met mine. The defiance, the panic, the manipulation, all were gone. What remained was a raw, shameful recognition. I'm sorry, she said, the words barely audible, for all of it. I held her gaze. I did not smile. I did not nod. I simply acknowledged the statement with a slight inclination of my head. It was not forgiveness. It was receipt. Very well, Marcus said, breaking the moment. We will see you tomorrow at 10. Peterson stood, gathering his unused notepad. Chloe stood as well, her movements slow, like someone recovering from an illness. She did not look at me again as she followed her lawyer out of the room. When the door closed, Marcus let out a long breath. It's done, on your terms. The house will be yours again by this time tomorrow. I looked at the empty chair where she had sat. The victory was complete, and it tasted like dust and cold water. There was no joy, only a profound and weary finality. The legal battle was won. The war for what came next, the slow, uncertain work of any future relationship, was a different campaign entirely. But for today, the terms of peace were secured. I had my house back. The signed settlement agreement and the new quitclaim deed were executed the next morning in Marcus's conference room, a swift and silent affair. Chloe signed where she was told to sign. Her attorney watched. I signed. Marcus notarized. The apology letter, handwritten on a single sheet of paper, was passed to me. I read it once, folded it, and placed it in my bag without comment. It was an admission of wrongdoing. It was what I required. It was not what I wanted. Marcus filed the reconveyance deed with the county recorder that afternoon. The Lee's pendants would be removed. The lawsuit would be dismissed. The police investigation into Chloe would likely be closed, given the civil resolution and her cooperation. Derek's separate case would continue. That was no longer my concern. A week later, a thick envelope arrived in my mail. The return address was the county recorder's office. Inside was the officially recorded deed, bearing my name as the sole grantee once more. The paper had a raised seal, a physical confirmation of the legal reset. I carried it to my living room, to the fireproof safe in my closet. I opened the safe. I placed the new deed inside, next to the original from 1989. I closed the safe door, spun the lock, and heard the solid click of the bolt engaging. It was done. The house was mine. The reclamation was complete. That evening, I sat on my front porch swing. It was the golden hour, the sun low and heavy, painting the world in warm, long shadows. The neighborhood was settling into its evening rhythm. The smell of cut grass lingered. I held a glass of iced tea, the condensation cool against my fingers. I felt no urge to celebrate. I felt a deep, spreading quiet. The fury that had fueled me was spent, leaving behind a clean, if weary, peace. I heard a car approach, slow, and stop in front of my house. I did not turn my head. I listened to the door open and close, to the hesitant footsteps on my walkway. Chloe stood at the bottom of the porch steps. She held a small potted plant, a deep green philodendron with heart-shaped leaves. She was not dressed for an argument. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt. Her face was clean of makeup, her expression solemn. "Mom." I looked at her. I said nothing. "I brought this," she said, her voice soft. She did not move to come up the steps without invitation. "It's a peace offering, not to make things okay, just to say I'm trying to understand." I studied her. The defiance was gone. The cunning was gone. What remained looked stripped bare and younger than her 32 years. She held the plant like an offering at an altar. After a moment, I nodded. "You can bring it up." She climbed the 3 steps and placed the pot carefully on the porch floor near my feet. She did not try to hand it to me. She straightened up, but did not presume to sit. "The deed came," I said. "I'm glad." She looked out at the street, then back at me. "I start a new job next week. It's a data entry position. It's not sales, it's straightforward." "That is good," I said. "Derek is being charged. They told me. I'm not involved with that anymore." I took a sip of my tea. The ice had melted, diluting it. "I see." The silence stretched, but it was not the hostile silence of the garden confrontation. It was a space, empty and waiting to be filled with something new, or perhaps left empty for a long time. "I don't expect anything, Mom," she finally said, her eyes on the floorboards. "I know what I broke. I just wanted you to know I'm here, and I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, because it was wrong." I believed her. This was a different apology from the one notarized in Marcus's office. That was for the law. This was for us, however fractured that us might be. I looked at the plant, then at the empty space on the swing beside me. It was a decision, not forgiveness. That was a country too far away to see. It was an acknowledgement of a first, tentative step on a very long road. "Sit down," I said. She looked up, surprised. Then she moved slowly, lowering herself onto the far end of the swing, leaving a careful distance between us. The swing moved gently with her weight. We sat together as the sun dipped lower. We did not speak. There was too much and not enough to say. Words would have been clumsy, dangerous things. The silence was more honest. It held the history of betrayal and the faint, uncertain possibility of a future truce. The house stood behind us, solid and reclaimed. The deed was in the safe. The war was over. What remained was the slow, patient work of tending to what might grow in the scarred ground. The philodendron at my feet was a start. Her presence on the swing was a start. The light faded from gold to purple. A neighbor waved from across the street. I raised my hand in a slight return gesture. Chloe kept her hands in her lap. We watched the evening arrive, 2 women on a porch, separated by a chasm of hurt, connected by the immutable fact of blood and history. The door was not open, but it was no longer bolted shut. For now, that was enough. For now, we sat in the quiet and let the night come.